I've got another, but
Okay,
yep,
you're good.
yep. Good.
You're all set.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
You have a good meeting. Did
so
you
go
let
enjoy
everybody
your
in?
evening, Pablo, and I'll catch up with you another time.
Very good. Very good. Take care, Bob. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Hey, Joe, how are you?
Not bad. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you.
All right. Oh.
Everything's okay with you?
Yeah, hanging in, getting ready for the winter.
Good. I think we have only one question for you, which I will get to in the course of the meeting. But thanks for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. What question? What is it in the meantime? Just in case I gotta get anything.
I'm going to in the chair's report. I want to ask if there was damage to any of the neighborhood parks from the storm.
Okay.
Okay. So if you could fill us in on whatever you know.
Yeah, no problem.
Good. And that's about it. The rest of it is mainly Van Cortlandt tonight.
Okay. Do you wanna ask me? Is that earlier on or later on? Or?
Yeah. No, that'll come early in the meeting.
Okay. Cool. Thanks, bro.
Sure. Hello, Christina. Hello, Christina.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good.
I have to get me a Van Cortlandt background for my Zoom meetings.
I know someone who can hook you up.
Good.
Progress.
So.
All right, everyone, it is 7:05. I'm going to call the meeting to order. My name is Bob Bender. This is the September meeting of Community Board 8 Parks and Recreation Committee. I am chairing this meeting in the absence of a permanent chair of this committee. There will be an election at the October Community Board 8 meeting for a new chair for this committee. But in the meantime, this meeting was scheduled. We have some important business to conduct tonight. So at the request of the Community Board Chair, Laura Spalter, I am chairing this meeting. I would like to begin by asking, let me see, the person who is calling in from the phone number 718-630-3600 to please identify himself or herself. Would the person who has the phone number 718-530-3500 please identify himself or herself?
This is Pam Judd.
Okay, and are you a member of the community or are you representing someone?
Member of the community.
Okay, and can you spell your last name, please?
Judd.
Thank you. All right, we are one short of a quorum at the moment, but I think we can begin the meeting. The only thing we have to vote on at the top of the meeting is the minutes of the June 23rd committee meeting. We'll hold off on that until we have at least one more committee member present. But I want to welcome everybody tonight. While we wait for a fourth member of the committee to join, I would like to ask one of the other members of the committee, David or Rob, would you be kind enough to take a screenshot right now and then again at 8 o'clock so we can keep track of the attendance, okay? I'm continuing to admit people as I see them, but you know, I want to make sure that we record the participants over the course of the meeting. Okay, thank you both. So I'll begin with a chair's report. There are a couple of things I wanted to bring up before we get into the main business of the evening. I wanted to begin by commenting on the storm that we had on September 1st, that remnant of Hurricane Ida, which dumped all that rainwater on the community and caused such havoc. It did do some damage to our local parks. I'm aware of that. In Van Cortlandt Park, the pool was shut down, and I'm told that some of the mechanical equipment at the pool was damaged. I don't know, you know, the pool season is over now, so I don't know the extent of that damage, but you know, it has no bearing on the present pool season. But beyond that, there was also severe erosion to some of the trails in Van Cortlandt Park. I know the cross-country trail, which I'm familiar with, has suffered some significant erosion thanks to the storm. And I'm told that has happened on some of the other trails in the park. There were trees that came down and had to be removed from some of the trails. And I was also told that some of the vehicles in Van Cortlandt Park were also damaged. We have our neighborhood parks manager, Joe Magneri, on the call. And Joe, could you tell us, did the storm do any significant damage to any of our local parks?
Yeah, you know, Bob, we kind of got lucky. It was more of like a, you know, like a flooding situation instead of high winds with trees going down. So we did have one of the rails in Ewan Park closer to the top of the main staircase. A tree fell down and bent it. I think somebody needs to mute themselves.
Yeah, Joe, let me interrupt you for just a second. Would everybody who is not speaking, which at the moment is myself and Joe Magneri, please mute yourself, okay? That will make for much better meeting.
94 was cold.
Okay.
I was here and I had all the windows open.
Edie Burke, could you please mute
I woke up and I
yourself?
could see my breath.
Okay. Maybe because you have hot stuff.
Deirdre, please mute your microphone.
Yeah, I've just muted her. Okay, I'm sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, Seaton, as far as Ewan, as far as a tree coming down and damaging part of the property, that was Ewan Park. We had a little bit of flooding at Seaton. We were able to take care of that with the drain, but we were really spared when it comes to physical damage to our properties. The council member called me, sent me an email regarding a street tree down that we were able to resolve pretty quickly, but it was more of a flooding, more of a water issue than a trees down physical damage issue.
So has that damage in Ewan Park been repaired, Joe?
The work request is in. We're pushing it, and but the work request is in.
Okay. One other issue I know you're aware of, Joe. Apparently there's some construction rubble around the bell tower monument.
No, yeah, I think it's more of a bus might have, while making a turn, did some damage. So that's another thing that I have a bunch of work requests in. We're gonna have to get the mason there and do some repairs.
Okay. So do we have any timetable on those repairs?
Give me by like mid next week.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, I'll ask the board office to follow up. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. I see we have a question from Jody Cologne.
Of course. Hey, good evening, everybody. Joe, there were also some large limbs down in Henry Hudson Park. So okay. I've actually been chopping them up manually.
Okay.
And I spoke to Dan about that. There's a lot of woody debris in the park.
Okay, but no like damage, right? There was no like structural damage to benches, and it was more of some limbs coming down and
limbs coming down in the lawn area.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, Jody, say that again. Which park was that?
Henry Hudson Park.
Henry Hudson. Okay. Thanks.
Was
that the upper or the lower?
The upper park. I'm now part of the steward, so I'm there every Saturday for a couple of hours weeding.
Oh, nice way to spend a Saturday, Jody.
It is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I see we also have a question from Stephanie Coggins.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. There's just one thing that I did. I'm also a member of the stewards of Henry Hudson. And in one of the children's playgrounds, some of the tiles came up. They were pushed up by water getting underneath them in the children's playground in Paul's Park.
Sure. I'm sorry. I'll let you continue. I apologize.
In the bigger kids' playground, not the small kids' playground, not the baby playground, but the bigger kids' playground, where there are swing sets. Some of the tiles, the rubber tiles, water got underneath them and pushed them up. I don't know whether anybody has moved them back into place, but they did get pushed up.
Yeah,
so,
I'll take a ride up there tomorrow, but we take care of those things like that. That's a safety issue, so that's like immediate attention. And that's actually a very common problem throughout the borough. The rain gets under them and they kind of just float away. So definitely.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to mention it because I just remembered it. Actually, I was out there the morning after the flooding, with my dog, and somebody pointed that out to me, and I just remembered it. But
Sure.
in any
Yeah,
event,
we even get that sometimes when if there's a drain clog with the spray showers on
yeah.
and there's
Yeah,
some
no,
water they
it's
flow away.
not a huge thing, and it
Yeah,
wasn't. It was only
yeah.
a couple along the edges. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank
but
you.
you may have already fixed it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm gonna put my my email in the chat as well for everybody. If you ever see anything you want to contact me, you could always email me. So I'm gonna put that now.
Yeah, Joe, we don't have chat on the community
all
board. Why don't you just, well, it's very easy, right? It's joseph.magneri, M-A-G-N-E-R-I,
Yep.
parks.nyc.gov.
That's it. And you guys are anybody on this meeting is invited to share any information or concerns.
Okay, thanks a lot, Joe. Next item is, I know there was over the summer, well, actually before the summer, there was some discussion back in June about some trees on Sedgwick Avenue opposite the reservoir. A tree was taken down that appeared to be healthy, but according to the foresters in the forestry division of the Parks Department, the tree actually had some significant problems at the root level. There was an agreement that the forestry division would do a study of the other trees along Sedgwick Avenue because there is some concern that they may also have the same root damage. That study was supposed to be done over the summer. It was postponed because due to the heavy rains and storms we had over the summer, the forestry division said that they were actually on call quite a bit and did not have the opportunity to do this study. I have been in touch with the chief forester in the Bronx, and he said that they are still planning to do the study in the next few weeks. So this is an issue that will come back to the October committee meeting. I am told that the noise complaints were not as great this summer from the parks as they have been in the past. Some of the particular trouble spots in the southwest corner of Van Cortlandt Park at 261st Street and also Washington's Walk in Kingsbridge Heights seem to be better than they were last year. And that is due to the efforts of the previous chair of the committee, Rosemary Ginty, the Parks Department, of course, the PEP officers, particularly in Van Cortlandt Park, and also the NYPD. And last but by no means least, the neighbors themselves who have complained about this situation and brought it to the attention of the community board. I did see in the Riverdale Press this week that there seem to be some new trouble spots that have popped up. I would just remind everybody on this call that if there is a problem that leads you to call 311 and file a complaint, please send that complaint number to the Community Board 8 office so that the Community Board office can follow up on these complaints. We have the ability to do that and to make sure that these complaints get attention and get resolved. So just a reminder to everybody, if you do have a complaint in the area where you live from one of the local parks, please be sure to share it with the Community Board office. The only other item I already mentioned, which is that there will be an election for a new chair of this committee in October, and the October meeting, which is scheduled for the 4th Wednesday in October, will still take place as planned. So that is it on the chair's report. So we'll move on to the agenda. I'm sorry, David Gilman, I see your hand is up.
Yes, Bob, thank you. I just put it up. Question for Joe Magneri. I told you a couple months ago I was going to ask you this question regarding Seton Park, the new turf, and the rules about use of metal spikes by ball players, particularly from the schools and the leagues, and the voiding of their permits to use a field if they do use metal spikes or cleats when playing. So the question for you is exactly what is the mechanism for enforcement to one, have parks employees or PEPs observe it, and or for members of the community who see people playing using metal cleats? What is the mechanism for enforcement?
So after that meeting, I actually contacted Michelle, who's our sports permits contact, and had her send an email out to the leagues explaining to them what they already know, which is that all turf permits, you can't be using the metal cleats. It's kind of like you hope people respect the rules. Obviously if we see it, we could say something, but as I said before, David, we really don't have the PEP resources to send PEP officers out to do cleat checks on athletic fields. It's just not something that we could do. I mean, it's just when it comes to the priorities and barbecuing and illegal dumping, and then there's the cleats. I mean, if you give me a time and a league and an email when you see it, and then I could send an email the way I did the last time, that could work. But as far as, checking on them like that, it's gonna be really hard to do. I couldn't make that commitment, and I'm sure PEP would agree that it's, so.
All right. So, all right, that was the explicit question I asked you. So what you're telling us is that Parks and PEP will not be enforcing these rules directly, and that if members of the community, hang on, Joe, let me finish. And if members of the community do observe the use of metal cleats on the Seton fields, that we are to contact you with the details.
Yeah, you could contact me with the details. My staff, same thing. But what I'm saying is that I'm not saying that we're not going to enforce rules. I'm saying that to allocate PEP time to doing cleat checks on athletic fields just doesn't seem like a huge priority, David. I mean, I'm not saying that we're ignoring it. I'm just saying, a request, that there's illegal barbecuing or some craziness going on the property, but instead of them addressing that, they're going to be driving around baseball fields checking people's cleats. I don't see that being.
All right, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. I see that our councilman has joined us. Councilman, do you have anything you want to say to the committee tonight? And thank you for being here.
Oh, well, Bob, thank you for having me. It's good to always see so many people at the parks, the parks meetings. I don't have a ton to report. As many of you know, I'm on the Parks Committee on the City Council. There's a package of legislation that we're moving through that I've sponsored a handful of the bills dealing with tree census and stump removal and things like that. Was that Stephanie being excited? I want to find the bills. One is health assessments and deals with health assessments and inspection. Another one is a task force coordinating the removal of fallen trees due to severe weather events. And another is dealing with tree stump removals. So those are just three of the things we're trying to address with some legislation in the City Council. And as always, Enzo, I think Enzo is on. Lorenzo Manzano from my office. So he's here at the meeting. Any issues? Hi, Jody.
Hey there.
I did have one other thing that's relevant to this committee, but I think Jody has a question. It's probably about the same thing.
No, I'm going to put you on the spot. A lot of this legislation adds more man hours, people hours to parks without an increase in funding. So is there any talk about adding to the forestry budget or whoever takes care of street trees
I don't
having a
know if
lot
that's part of the conversation. So some of this is amending the administrative code, and one of them is creating a new task force. Let's say part of Parks and Recreation. So it includes so the Downtree Task Force, for example, includes police department, fire department, sanitation, transportation, all working together. So it's not putting everything on parks. As we know, since after the storm, we've had a number of issues with downed trees. So this legislation tries to address that. And I can send the board like the list of legislation that I sponsored and that we're moving regarding parks. The other thing that I want to share with some details about it, so it's not all on the Parks Department employees. The other thing I want to share with you all is about composting. I think in every email I send out to the community, on Twitter every other week, I'm talking about composting. Every time I get in front of the community board, I talk about composting. We were all very excited. We got composting back. It was great. The Department of Sanitation came back to us and said they're not doing it in our community because they didn't have enough signups. In fact, they said that none of the Bronx community boards are getting composting. And I this was obviously extremely disappointing and disheartening because I was very excited about composting. The community was very excited about it, not to mention its importance in the environment in our community. So we're going to be advocating to first just get some information. How many is not enough signups? How many signups do we actually need? And there's also an issue with the way they count buildings, which I have issue with, which I'm going to be taking up along with Councilmember Powers and a few other council members, that apparently they count single family homes almost the same weight as, buildings like Skyview, where I live. The 1,300 units counts the same as a single house because it's by like a board in a building counts as one. Just as a house counts as one. So we took issue with that. So we're going to keep pushing DSNY to get us information and to do the right thing, to kind of keep their promise about reinstituting composting.
Councilman, I just wanted to say I appreciate your following up on that, because everybody I know who signed up for the composting has been told that there were not enough signups, and the whole process seems to be particularly opaque. We don't know what their standards are. They haven't disclosed it. So I think whatever you can do would really benefit the community.
So we've had meetings with DSNY, and we just sent them a letter requesting this data, requesting the information about what the threshold is, how do we rank compared to other community boards, and even where on a map it is. Because something that I'm, happy to do is I'm happy to go door to door, knocking on doors, telling people to sign up. But I can only do that if we know where people signed up. Right. One of the things they do look up, I would encourage everyone here, it's a little confusing. I think Ed's probably explained it better, honestly. But the board of a building has to do the application, but you can all still apply not apply. You can all still go online and say that you want composting, and that would take into the DSNY would take that into account. So if you're on this call right now, and composting is important, if you agree that composting is important, which it is, I would encourage you all to go online and sign up for the composting. And we'll continue in my office to push for the information and push for them to count buildings the right way, so that we in the Bronx can get composting just like they have over in Brooklyn.
All right, well, thank you, Councilman. I really appreciate you coming to the meeting, and thanks for that report. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Bob.
All right, take care. All right, so we have an agenda item that I would like to move on to. But before we do that, I noticed that we now have a quorum of the committee members. So I'm going to ask the committee. I hope everybody on the committee has had an opportunity to review the minutes of the June committee meeting, the last meeting that was held by this committee. We now have 4 committee members, David Gilman, Rob Jaklowski, Deb Travis, and myself. So this question is only for the 4 committee members. Do I have any objections to the June committee minutes? Do I have any abstentions with regard to the June committee minutes? All right, so I assume then that the minutes are approved by a vote of 4-0. Thank you. All right, we now move on to the first major item on the agenda tonight, which is a presentation that we are getting from Groundworks Hudson Valley regarding the Yonkers Greenway and also Van Cortlandt Park. And I just want to check the folks that from Groundworks that I am expecting. The list of participants is getting a little long. Let's see, I see Ann Vaderlaus. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Ann?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, you're here.
I am.
And who else is here from Groundworks Hudson Valley?
We have, yes, Oded Holzinger from Groundworks Hudson Valley, and we also have Mark K. Morrison with the landscape architecture firm working with us.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, so I was given some information about the folks from Groundworks Hudson Valley who are going to be presenting tonight. So I will just read what I was given to introduce everybody to everyone who is on this Zoom meeting. Mark K. Morrison is the principal and owner of the firm Mark K. Morrison Landscape Architecture, PC, MKM. MKM has been a presence in the greater New York City area for over 40 years since the firm was founded in 1983. Mark has done extensive work for New York City agencies, from parks to the School Construction Authority to the DOT. MKM is currently working with Groundworks Hudson Valley to compile a feasibility report on pedestrian connections in the Northwest Forest in Van Cortlandt Park. Also on the call is Ann Vaderlaus, the Director of Design, who has been with MKM since 2011 and has completed projects which include educational and commercial design, urban planning, and green infrastructure. I'm sorry, Oded, I don't have your bio here, but I hope that Ann or Mark could introduce you.
I'll introduce Oded.
Okay, thank you.
Oded Holzinger is Groundworks Hudson Valley's Climate Resilience Manager. Oded is an environmental urban planner focusing on resilience planning, river restoration, and urban greening. Oded has a master's in urban planning from Hunter College and a BA in geography from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And Oded is actually going to speak first, and he's going to speak to what has happened prior to this moment in time regarding the study, the feasibility efforts.
Okay, Oded, the floor is yours.
But can you share the screen? Mark's office will be projecting the presentation.
I believe you actually have the ability to share the screen.
So share the screen now.
Yeah, we have, yeah, there you go.
Okay, thank you so much, Bob, for opening up the meeting, and thank you, Anne, for the lovely introduction. So again, sorry, I see Catherine Hines. If you could just mute yourself.
Yeah, one more time, everybody on the call, if you're not speaking, and at the moment that's everybody but Oded and myself, please mute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, my name is Oded Holzinger, and I'm the Climate Resilience Manager at Groundworks Hudson Valley. Groundworks Hudson Valley is an environmental nonprofit. We're based in Yonkers. We work to promote environmental restoration, greening, and access to green space, as well as education in Yonkers, as well as in the surrounding of Yonkers, whether that is in Westchester County or in the Bronx. some of you might know our science barge on the Hudson River, and we are working now on developing this feasibility study, which evolved out of the Yonkers Greenway project, which we helped lead in Yonkers. And we're very fortunate to be working with MKM Landscape Architecture firm supporting us on this project. I met some of you already a couple years ago to discuss this when we were first starting when we just started the project. And now we're at the point where we're starting to develop the study itself, which is when we're also engaging with the community and collecting your input. So thank you everyone for joining today. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly review some of the main questions that we've been getting prior to this meeting and what we're actually gonna talk about today. And then I'll pass it on to the folks at MKM to discuss the feasibility study and what input we're looking to get from the community. So first and foremost, what is a feasibility study? It's important to frame it properly. A feasibility study is a preliminary phase. It is not a design plan.
Huh?
Mark,
yeah, we have I don't know what they're doing in the morning, Ben. Yeah.
All right. Benny, if you could mute yourself. And Mark, we lost the screen sharing.
Sorry, can you see it? Let me do it again. Give me a second.
Sure, I'll continue meanwhile. So just to properly frame what what the project is all about, we're conducting a feasibility study. It is not a design plan. We're not going to make, at the end of this process, we're not going to make any design recommendations of sorts. Following in a couple of minutes, MKM will discuss exactly what is a feasibility study. They have a lot of experience running feasibility studies. So again, this is just a preliminary step in order to learn who uses the park, how they uses it, what are the concerns, the main needs, as well as some of the opportunities for potential improvements. And so as part of this study, we're looking at a whole sort of different items and issues, but just to kind of review the main things we'll be doing here that we're looking at. So our focus through the study is on first improving the already existing pedestrian links between the Northwest Forest and Yonkers. We're looking at the existing links. We're not looking to open any new links, any new entrances to the park, but today there are certain points where people could go from Van Cortlandt Park into Yonkers and from Yonkers into Van Cortlandt Park. And those are somewhat neglected, and we're looking at how they could be improved. Second is that we're looking to address different concerns along the Yonkers border. We've already identified some of these concerns. We're engaging with the community in the Bronx as well as the community in Yonkers to learn about what is keeping people away from the park, what would they like to see change. We're also assessing the environmental needs of the Northwest Forest. I'm sure many of you who know the Northwest Forest are aware of some of the environmental issues there, if it's the invasive species, if it's dumping, things like this. And we actually just finalized an environmental report of the Northwest Woods, and it will be available on Groundwork Hudson Valley's website very soon. And then finally, we're also assessing pedestrian circulation in the Northwest Woods, looking at which trails are being used, how they're being used, and what could be done to improve pedestrian circulation through the Northwest Woods, the Northwest Forest. Another main question that I want to address here in the beginning is why is Groundwork Hudson Valley leading this study? We're, as I mentioned, a Yonkers-based organization. So I just want to give you a little bit of background to what brought us to initiate this study. So first, in 2014, Groundwork Hudson Valley took part in an EPA area-wide plan for Yonkers Lawrence Street neighborhood. That is the neighborhood that is bordering Van Cortlandt Park in Southwest Yonkers. And as part of that EPA area-wide plan, the improved pedestrian access from Southwest Yonkers to Van Cortlandt Park was identified as a main need for the neighborhood. In addition to that, in 2014, the master plan for Van Cortlandt Park 2034 was published, and it was also identified in the master plan that better access from Yonkers, better connections between the park and Yonkers is a community concern. And then finally, we're working a lot in Southwest Yonkers on looking at at vulnerability to climate change, mainly looking at extreme heat and identifying opportunities to increase resiliency to climate change in that area. And access to public green space is critical for addressing climate change at these areas, where a lot of people don't own private backyards and are relying on public green space to get some rest from the blazing sun during the summer months. And so we identified the issue of accessing Van Cortlandt Park as a main issue for addressing climate change. Next slide, please. Thank you. Who is paying for this study? So this study is funded by New York State Department of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation as part of the state's effort to promote cross-border collaboration. As I'm sure many of you know, there are often difficulties in doing projects when you have multiple municipalities involved. And we found that this might be the case here. And so the state has also identified a need to promote this cross-border collaboration, and that was part of what went into the grant that is paying for this project. And here it's important to mention that in addition to the feasibility study, the same grant is also paying for our Green Team program, which is a program through which we employ high school youth from Southwest Yonkers to work in environmental restoration. And our Green Team has been working with the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance interns on environmental restoration of the Northwest Woods. They've been fighting invasives, they've been cleaning up the area, and they've been working together. So even before anything happens along the border, we already have youth from both communities working together to restore the natural habitat. You can see some of them over here. And in the image below, you can see what is now the main entrance, the main access point from Yonkers into Van Cortlandt Park on Van Cortlandt Park Avenue. And I know it's hard to see that this is actually an access point, but there is a crack in the fence that is not someone illegally opened. That's the legal access point. And that's one of the areas we're looking at. Finally, what was done until now? So we had some initial community engagement. We met with the community board, with this committee a couple of years ago, and we learned about the concerns. And I want to mention here that some of the input that we received back then in the meeting, as well as in a meeting we hosted in our office, was input that we took very seriously. And we actually decided to focus our efforts here on the issues that we found to be more feasible and also more maybe accepted by the community. And so now we're no longer looking at anything that has to do with bicycle going into the park, and instead, we'll discuss this later in the presentation, instead we're working with the city of Yonkers to provide on-street alternatives, and we're focusing the feasibility study on pedestrian access. We also are currently in the process of running a survey. Some of you might have seen that survey to gather additional community input. The ongoing environmental stewardship by our youth groups, and the environmental assessment report that I mentioned. So these are just the main questions that we've received prior to this meeting that I wanted to state in the beginning. And now I'm gonna pass it on to the folks at MKM to discuss the process of the development of the study. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Bob, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Oded, thank you for kicking the presentation off. You can go to the next slide. People ask why produce a feasibility report. This is basically to get data that we can use at this stage, and then any ongoing groups will be able to use as well. It's to determine who uses the park, which entry points are the most utilized and why. To raise awareness of the park as a possible pedestrian linkage between the Hudson River, Yonkers, and Van Cortlandt Park's amenities in the Bronx. Also to determine potential universally accessible points into the Northwest Forest for the Bronx and Yonkers residents. It's also to provide data points that will enable enhanced stewardship of the Northwest Forest, as even though this is a forever wild site, it's still riddled with invasive species, and Oded's group has been active in this, along with community volunteers that we've run across when we have been in the park. It's also to investigate whether park users want increased signage or mapping in the Northwest Forest, and last, to assess physical conditions of the paths and any outstanding safety issues that may occur at this time. I would imagine the majority of the people here know where the Northwest Forest is. I think that's always an interesting question because there probably are people that don't know where it is, but it's right at the dividing line between the Bronx and Yonkers, the northern boundary. And you have the overall Van Cortlandt Park, and then the piece up in the northwest corner known as the Northwest Forest. So that brings us to what is the Northwest Forest. It's 188 acres of land in the northwest corner of Van Cortlandt Park. It's a forest growing on very rocky and undulating land overlooking valleys. Former site for a spur of the New York and Putnam rail line between the lake and Van Cortlandt Park and Yonkers. It's a haven for regional wildlife, pollinators, it's largely used for recreational purposes, and it's a natural preserve with New York City Parks Forever Wild designation. Forever Wild properties are reasonably abundant in New York City and all the boroughs. They tend to be associated with the larger parks, but it's a protected, ecologically valuable land within the 5 boroughs under a New York City Parks Department program. Land meant to expand public awareness of ecosystems, areas meant to encourage public stewardship over undeveloped lands. Programs currently includes 8,700 acres citywide, and I believe those are in all 5 boroughs. Provides habitats for urban flora and fauna. It's accessible by public transportation. And the note, no biking or motorized vehicles allowed. And that's actually true throughout Van Cortlandt Park, not just the Northwest Forest. Who uses the forest? Of course, naturalists and birders. Again, no bikers. We've seen hikers and pedestrians, walkers, persons with disabilities, people of all ages, dog walkers in abundance, cross-country runners, fitness, running, jogging, and other forms of exercise. Who will complete this report, compile this report? As Odette said, we were hired by Groundwork Hudson Valley, fortunately, to work on the team. So we're taking the lead in terms of working in collaboration with, again, Groundworks Hudson Valley and the Van Cortlandt Parks Alliance to compile a report on current usage patterns in the Northwest Forest. Our team includes an urban archaeologist who is studying whether there are likely to be any Native American remains or campsites within the heavily traveled paths in the Northwest Forest. Our team includes an environmental engineer who are studying the environmental conditions near the path system in the forest, sensitive habitat, invasive plant species, vegetation types, and other indicators of site use that may be impacted, such as litter. Team lastly includes a civil engineer who will assess existing and potential areas of erosion and site degradation. And some of you mentioned this early on. You can see recently the issues we had with Ida coming through. It was quite devastating in a lot of areas. Not going to go down the entire list, but there was, I think Odette alluded to the 2014 master plan for the park. And there were many city groups and agencies consulted during this time. And the good news for bicyclists, I guess, is that the Putnam Greenway opened in last October of 2020. And that was quite an ordeal. It took a long time to get that completed. Next slide. The master plan, again, the 2014 master plan had a series of conclusions in relation to the shift to the Northwest Forest. And it was really to work to improve forest health, incorporate natural areas with a management plan, preserve and promote historic sites and trails, incorporate a trail plan into the master plan, enhance connectivity between paths and trails, provide a perimeter pathway within the park, and increase connections across highways and to neighborhoods surrounding the park, including Yonkers. There are bike connections. As we said, bikes are not allowed in the Northwest Forest. Commuter bike lanes have been established along South Broadway in Yonkers. From the Bronx border to downtown Yonkers waterfront are planned to be implemented by 2023. A bike lane extends from Yonkers along Broadway to the 242nd Street subway stop. And bikers from the Lincoln neighborhood of Yonkers can connect to the South County Trail, then to the Putnam Greenway and to the 242nd Street subway stop if they choose. Here in 2021, the concepts that will be explored during the feasibility study will be how feasible is a safe gateway connection between the Yonkers Greenway and the Northwest Forest? What are the best practices for keeping motorized vehicles from the pedestrian park routes? We understand from the Parks Department that there are quite a few four-wheelers and all-terrain vehicles that do get into the park, and some I think actually do get in to the Northwest Forest as well. Should New York City Parks improve signage, both directional and informational, at entrances along the designated primary pedestrian routes? We see, some semblance of signage, although it's pretty difficult and it's kind of unsafe because I think there should be a bit more directional signage in particular. Should New York City Parks provide universally accessible points along Broadway so that persons with disabilities would be able to get into portions of the Northwest Forest to partake of, various activities and enjoy that special environment. And then how, whether, and where should DOT implement a bike storage facility at the 242nd Street subway station? And that's part of this proposal, but we're looking, and I think there's another group, I think, actively and possibly implementing that as we speak. And Odette had an ending slide of the potential access, but there is an existing pedestrian entry to the Northwest Forest from Yonkers at Van Cortlandt Park Avenue south, as you can see from the red arrows. It's, you know, pretty indistinguishable a good part of the year with all the vegetation in that, but there actually is a man-built entrance that exists now. So I think last slide, I believe. Thanks very much for having us come and speak tonight. You can contact us by email. There is a survey that we put out a number of weeks ago. It'd be great if you took that because we're trying to gather as much information as we possibly can to add to the database. Again, thank you very much.
Mark, thank you very much for the presentation. Does that conclude the presentation from Groundworks Hudson Valley, or is there anything else?
Yeah, that I think concludes. And as you mentioned, we can do a little bit of Q&A if you like.
Oh, I have no doubt that there will be more than a little bit of Q&A, but we'll take that one step at a time. I want to say, first of all, just as background for everybody who's at the meeting, Oded referred to this earlier. Groundworks Hudson Valley did come to the community board in May of 2019 for a presentation. One of the points that we made very strongly at that time was we did not want any of these access points to allow motorized vehicles, nor did we want the Northwest Forest to become a bicycle access point. And I'm very glad to see that you have incorporated those conclusions from that meeting into the proposed design, or into the feasibility plan, I should say. So I'm very glad to see that. I do want to ask, and I see that the Van Cortlandt Park Administrator, Stephanie Ehrlich, has just arrived. But as she's joining us, let me just say what I want to do here is give the committee members an opportunity to ask some questions. Once they have asked questions, then I will open it up to everybody. I'm going to ask in the beginning, let's please limit everybody to a single question so that we can take as many questions as possible. If we have enough time, then we can always go back and take additional questions from people who've already asked. But for starters, we'll do the committee members, and then one question, please, from everybody in the community. But I do want to put a question to Stephanie Ehrlich, the administrator of Van Cortlandt Park. And Stephanie, I'm just wondering if you could address the role of the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance in this process. You know, we've seen the feasibility study from Groundworks Hudson Valley. Tell us what the Alliance's role would be, how you're working with Groundworks Hudson Valley, and clarify, if you would, for everybody, just what can and cannot be done with or without the participation of the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. Because of course, Van Cortlandt Park, all of it, the Northwest Forest and all of it is under the jurisdiction of the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. Stephanie, are you there?
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Thank you, Stephanie.
Okay, all right. So hi, everybody. We at the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance have been working closely with MKM and with Groundworks Hudson Valley on this feasibility study. And the way that we are looking at it is that this is a way to understand the lay of the land of what is out there and what the needs are. And I do want to emphasize that we are not advocating for adding anything that would increase bike traffic or anything of the sort. Because in my dual role as also the park administrator and a Parks Department employee, I'm actually the person who receives the bulk of the complaints and the concerns about that kind of bad behavior in the park. So we're not in any way looking to go in that direction. But before we even get there, this really is just sort of a taking the community's pulse, understanding better how we can improve the park in that area. And, you know, it is just an echo of the master plan, which is obviously endorsed by NYC Parks. And in that master plan, there was a very, very clear need and decision to improve entrances so that they're more attractive and safer and more secure. So so that's how we're working together. And, you know, because I wear the two hats, I am hoping to be an advocate for keeping things safe in the best way possible.
All right, thank you, Stephanie.
Is that good? Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, so I see questions from two of the committee members. I'll start with David Gelman.
Yes, you folks in your presentation provided three different, although sort of overlaying maps. I just want to clarify exactly how your definition of Northwest Forest is made. Obviously, it's bounded on the west by Broadway, bounded on the north by the city line at Yonkers, bounded on the east, I believe, by the Henry Hudson Parkway, and bounded on the south either by the Henry Hudson Parkway or the Mosholu Avenue extension, which is basically the entrance from Broadway to the stables. So could you really define the east and south boundaries, please? Somebody.
I don't know if Odette, if you want to do that.
Sure. Yes, no problem. So yes, regarding the east boundary, yes, you're right. We're looking at the Henry Hudson Parkway. As for the southern boundary, I would say there are two southern boundaries to the area we're looking at. First is the Mosholu access point, because everything north of there is really where the forest is, and that's where we're looking at things like the pedestrian circulation. There's less things to look at when it comes to pedestrian circulation by the stables. We're also looking at you know, as we're also reviewing the area down around the stables as part of this study, but that's not where the main focus is. The main focus is bounded by the Mosholu Parkway.
The Mosholu Avenue extension.
The Mosholu Avenue extension, thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
Because there's also a brand new children's playground just below there as well.
Yes.
All right, but all right, so yeah, I just wanted to clarify the boundaries so we don't have any confusion going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Rob Jaklowski.
Hi. Do you envision, one thing said you were going to remove redundant trails, and I think another said that you were going to bring up the gravel, the crushed gravel. So do you envision treating these trails so that they end up looking like the existing cross-country trails to the, I guess what would be the east, the traditional backcountry hills? Is that what you're envisioning? That it's going to be crushed gravel, and so looking just like the trail that's right next door that we always use for cross-country races?
I would say that right now we're trying to gather information to find out what people would like to have the trails be made of. And we're probably going to come up with a series of potential options in the feasibility study, but we're not going to be choosing a particular paving for the trails at this stage. I hope that doesn't sound like a non-answer, but it gets into, as you know, there'll be contention throughout, per the various choices.
Okay, Rob?
Okay.
All right. I don't see any other hands from committee members. I do see the Community Board Chair Laura Spalter has her hand up. Laura?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I walk in the Northwest Woods every week, and it's tranquil, lush. It's a real jewel. My problem with the Groundworks goal of uniting the Northwest Woods with Yonkers is that I see flaws. And because the Yonkers Greenway clearly promotes bicycles, you know, you Google Yonkers Greenway and that's what you see, the transportation issues and the bikes. I believe a lot of the people using the Yonkers Greenway, what do they do? What do the users do when they arrive at Van Cortlandt Park? They're going to want to come in through the park, even though there might be signs, even though it might be stated go another way. I think that is what they're going to do, because Yonkers Greenway, the usage is so different from the Northwest Woods. What would make sense is that they turn and they hit Yonkers and go down the protected bike path that's on Broadway straight to 242nd Street. I always go back to the key reason we have fences at Saratoga and Van Cortlandt Park Avenue. It's there to prevent ATVs, bikes, e-bikes, dirt bikes, and especially dumping. That's why the fences are there. You noted in the presentation that the current entrances are designed to allow pedestrians. I know, you know, it's very clear. It's not a hole in the fence. It stops at a certain point. That's very important. You know, and I understand that the Van Cortlandt Park Master Plan specifically calls for opening the entrances for the Yonkers Greenway. But my fear is, and my question is about enforcement. You know, after the grand opening, after the hoopla and the publicity, who's going to be there 24/7 to enforce the no bikes? We don't have the resources in the Parks Department. I doubt Greenworks will be there. We see all the issues and problems we have on the Putnam Trail. So, you know, I really have a lot of fears. I mean, beautification, which is what's on the survey, is different than opening. And while I understand it's in the master plan from 2014, there are tremendous issues where you might have problems, you'll get problems where we currently don't have problems. I mean, very occasionally I see a bike in the Northwest Woods. I believe that if you open, you will have them. And then we'll be left with a damaged trail from the wheels and the abuse. And those are my concerns, enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. So I'm going to start answering this, and then Mark or Anne, if you want to add anything, please go ahead. So Laura, thank you. That's a great question that you're raising. So I'm going to start by just giving a couple updates about the Yonkers Greenway. First is that the city of Yonkers is now working on finalizing the design plan, the final design documents for the Yonkers Greenway, which will hopefully get implemented in 2022. And as part of this process, the Greenway is actually going to end further north. The Yonkers Greenway is not going to get to Van Cortlandt Park. In fact, it's going to end or begin at the north end of the Carroll Avenue Park municipal parking lot. So that's going to be the access point. It's deep into Yonkers, and it's not going. You're not going to have a bicycle path getting all the way to the park. When that was decided for different reasons, we've been also working with the city of Yonkers to think about different ways to create on-street connections, bicycle connections between Southwest Yonkers and the Bronx in order to offer these connections, but also in order to separate you know, people who just commuters or people who just want to get to the train, get to the Bronx, from recreational users. And so as part of the Yonkers Greenway project, the city of Yonkers is also working to implement bicycle lanes on South Broadway in Yonkers that will connect downtown Yonkers to the existing protected bike lane on Broadway in the Bronx. And that will be the main area that cyclists will use. And yes, cyclists are going to be allowed on the Yonkers Greenway that is again gonna start north of the park, but the main users of it are going to be pedestrians. In addition to that, I want to say that not only that there are cyclists currently going in from these entrances, anyone on a bike can also go in from, you know, Broadway entrances, and that's where cyclists are also going in from. It's not only from the Yonkers side. And then finally is that we understand that cyclists are, you know, currently are not allowed into the Northwest Forest. We at Groundwork-Hudson Valley don't see this feasibility, the role of this feasibility study as changing this reality. And that is why we're not talking about it anymore. And instead, we see this as a concern. And so some of the recommendations that will be made could address that concern, whether it's through enforcement or through design. There's different elements of design that could keep cyclists and motorized vehicles away while inviting pedestrians in. And yes, you're right that those access points do exist there, but the fact is that there are a lot of residents living nearby the park in Yonkers that also have similar concerns. They would like to use the park more, but they feel like the area closer to the Yonkers border maybe doesn't feel very safe for pedestrian use, and they would like to see very similar things to what you're talking about, making the area feel safer and more inviting, and addressing things like dumping or things like noise complaint. And that is coming, these are concerns that we receive from both sides of the municipal border.
Okay, anybody else on that subject from Groundworks?
No, I think Oded covered that nicely.
Okay. So I will move on to additional questions that I see. Deirdre Burke.
Hi, Bob. First, apologies. Being a Luddite, I thought by reducing the volume on my computer, I had muted it. So big apology for the rudeness. I have a couple of questions. One, I know
we're asking, Didi, we're asking for one question per person to start, okay?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I attempted to fill out a survey concerning the Northwest Woods and could not fill out the survey because I am a user of the Northwest Woods. So when you came to the questions that said, why don't you use the Northwest Woods, I couldn't fill it out. So my question is, how much weight is being put on this survey, which appears to me to be a push poll and is generating results that were preordained?
I'll respond to that. There were some glitches in the survey, but we've gone in and fixed those. And we apologize for, I guess there were points where the survey routed people and there was not a not applicable response. But the main, we've repaired those. There were 2 discrepancies and those have been changed. So the main idea of the survey, it's not really a push-pull to direct people to certain things. Our idea is to try to get as broad a group for people from all different neighborhoods around the park users, people who don't use the park. Do they know about the park? And it's very difficult to write questions that, that appeal to or that reach out to so many different groups. That's what we're struggling with, and we hope that we get some responses that help us, put together some data points that will be useful for us.
Okay, a follow-up. What's to prevent somebody who wants to manipulate the survey from doing it over and over and over again? Because you really didn't have to identify yourself.
We haven't seen anything like that. We haven't noticed anything like that. We've noticed that the respondents have been broadly scattered. So we haven't seen any little hot spots that indicate that one person used the survey or took the survey multiple times.
But those of us who are users of the Northwest Woods could not complete the survey, so your data is flawed.
Didi, we're going to move on to some other questions. Okay, thank you.
I would really like an answer to how that survey is being used and
yes,
when it's going to be corrected.
I can add just one more sentence about this, is that first, as Anne mentioned, the issue that you're pointing out was corrected in the survey. And
I didn't get a copy of it.
And so the survey is available on our website, and just similarly to how, we're doing this community engagement meeting, but not everyone that have a certain opinion is here today. And that is also true about future meetings. So we use an array of tools for collecting input from the community. The survey is just one of them. And as Anne mentioned, we got a variety of different answers. And the input that we're getting from you here, the concerns we're hearing, the input we'll be getting in future community engagement meetings, as well as what we're seeing in the survey, all of that is going to help us understand what are the main concerns, what are the main asks, and it's not like we're going to work according to what the survey says and design anything according to it. So it's just one more tool in our tool belt.
Thank you, Oded. Okay, Jody, I see you have a question.
Hey there, and this actually ties into what I think is the last agenda item about what is a forever wild area. I've heard mention of beautifications. I thought I saw there's no playground. So I do walk on what I call the bridle path. That does lead down to Yonkers, and you turn back around and walk back. And I saw on some of the slides mention about erosion. And I think that part of it is we're at a time where people want convenience. They want everything within 5 minutes of where they live. And concerns balance, and how do you balance a natural forever wild place that will flood because it does have wetlands with this idea of increasing access and making it look pretty, which the Adirondacks and the Catskills aren't landscaped. So could you talk a little bit architecturally about what you're thinking in some of these improvements? I know you're not going to specify things, but words like beautification imply landscaping, not natural features. Could you just give me a little more reassurance about preserving forever wild?
No, I think as we tried to explain in the beginning, the charge that we've been presented with is to do the feasibility study. So we're not doing design recommendations at this point. We're listening to you, for example, if you think there's a lot of erosion, or you think the trails are too narrow, or you think there should be more signage, or the forest is unsafe. Any of those issues we'd like to hear about, because it'll be the next group, hopefully it'll be us as well, but whoever takes over the ongoing phase will be addressing the issues that you're speaking of. So,
right.
We're not saying right now that we want rock climbing or a new playground or a zip line or pave the trails or open it to bicycles or that. We're really gathering information from the surrounding communities that will then inform the design team as they move forward.
Which actually just repeated my concern is that people are going to be asking for those things. I live in the other end, the diagonal opposite end, and we have that issue with our Forever Wildlands right now where people want benches and daffodil bulbs and widen the trails and ADA means concrete. I mean, I have a disability and having a really soft surface like the bridle path is really important for my mobility. Mm-hmm. So I'm just a little concerned without having, I did try to do the survey, but I did hit recently, I don't know when that update went up, but I wasn't able to see all the questions at once without actually answering all the questions. Is it possible that we could get a copy of the survey without having to respond to it? You know, that would alleviate some of my concerns about people saying that they want all these amenities in what is a Forever Wild area.
Well, and don't forget, there's going to be a more than rigorous process moving forward. And the City of New York Parks Department own this property, and they have a lot of restrictions, you know, in force. So I think that's going to be the starting point. And you're always going to have people that want an amusement park there, and you're always going to want to have people who don't want anybody in except for them, you know, to use the forest. So there's going to be a broad range of requests, and it's going to be the communities ultimately, you know, that provide the support to go one direction or the other.
Yeah,
Dodie,
I was
Dodie,
on
we've got some other hands here. Okay?
Oh, good. There were no
like
other hands before. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Mark, I did want to say exactly what you just said. I think the thing we want to bear in mind here is that this area is under the jurisdiction of the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. Nobody's going to come in and pave it or do anything to it that is not approved by the Parks Department. And the Parks Department, anybody who's been on this committee and anybody who's been at these committee meetings in the past knows that anytime there's any sort of capital improvement project, the Parks Department comes before the community board and we discuss those issues. So I just want to alleviate the concern that somebody's going to come in and do something to transform the Northwest Forest without the Parks Department knowing about it. That's simply not going to happen. I mean,
no, it's actually the Parks Department, Bob. They
Right.
did pave the Putnam Trail when we were advocating for a more natural surface. So,
Well,
so it
you
is the
were,
Parks
you were,
Department.
Jody. You were advocating for a natural surface, and other people were advocating for a paved surface. So there was a long discussion. We all know that. You know, there was an open discussion, and some people are happy with the outcome, some people are not. But the point is, these projects, whenever anybody proposes something like this, they are discussed at community board meetings. So thank you very much. I want to move on. I see that.
Bob, I just want to make one quick comment.
Go ahead, Oded.
About the survey. If you go on to the Grand Rick Hudson Valley website, as soon as the first thing you'll see is a link to the survey, and once you say yes, I want to answer the survey, there are arrows that allow you to skip questions without answering them. So you could review all the questions in the survey without having to answer them.
Okay. Catherine Hines, I did see a question from you before, and you were off and you're back on. Are you with us?
Hey, can you hear me, Bob?
I can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Actually at Wave Hill, which had a garden benefit this evening. So I'm a little bit, I'm on the phone, so I'm sorry about the in and out. I did have a question, and I was wondering if the Groundworks is looking to make any kind of a recommendation about a wildlife feasibility study. So thinking about a Forever Wild area that is very important as habitat for wildlife. And the kind of concerns that our members have about things like paving, which I hear is not something you're looking to recommend, but also artificial light, which creates extensive and harmful disturbance to nesting birds in particular. So, we're looking to see if there's going to be that kind of approach. I know you're getting input from people who want to use the area, but there are all kinds of other living beings that use the area that can't speak. So I'm looking to see how those interests will be addressed in the study.
The Parks Department has, I know that they oppose lighting in Forever Wild areas if that's your main concern. So we're not, and I think didn't miss the beginning of our presentation. This is not a design proposal that we're doing. At this point, we're trying to understand what concerns are, and that's a very good concern that you've just voiced, which is that this is an area where wildlife and humans interact, and that any people going through the forest could disrupt this wildlife habitat. So that's something that's very important to note. I don't think the Parks Department really has any intentions of illuminating the Northwest Forest that I've ever heard. But have you?
Yeah, no, I don't think they do. I think the current concern is with thinking about a feasibility study about use and words like improvements. When we looked at what was available on the website, and a term like improvements is really a euphemism for paving or grading in a way that takes a Forever Wild area and increases human recreation in the space, or creates. I've also heard discussions of people who want really what amounts to a transect of the Northwest Woods to create a shortcut for commuters, and even if they're on foot, that kind of thing is when we think about what people are asking for, and what the survey is being used for, to speak to some of the other questions, are you looking to make a recommendation from Groundworks about this space concerning it as wildlife habitat and preserving it?
By the very definition of a Forever Wild is that it is a habitat for wildlife. And in fact, the constraints are extreme on Forever Wild properties. You can't cut down trees. Which means you can't change paths. The existing paths are human-made footpaths for the most part, except for the bridle trail. And so within those constraints, which are the rules and regulations of the New York City Parks Department, the idea that it would be even possible, or even the result of a feasibility study, that we would go and make transects and so on, or even suggest that is, it's not something that would happen.
Okay. When I was looking at the survey, it talked about lights. It talked about access at night and things like that. So, which for a Forever Wild area, in our view, should never happen.
I'll have to look at. I don't remember anything like that, but thank you for pointing that out.
So would you be prepared to say at this point you're not planning to put in any lights? And again, I know you can't do this without the approval of the Parks Department. You have no intention of putting in any lights in the Northwest Forest. You have no intention of paving anything in the Northwest Forest. Can you say that right now, unequivocally?
What I can say unequivocally is that this is not a design. We're not designing anything. What we're doing is compiling opinions from the community and making note of the fact that the Audubon Society is opposed to having lighting because it disturbs wildlife habitat. That's a very valid thing to put in our study. But we're not doing a design for the Northwest Forest. We're not designing paved paths or lighting or anything like that. So
Well, I'm thinking
your
about
question is a
recommendations
bit,
for you. Right.
We can't make that statement because we're not at that stage yet. So that'll be up to the next team, to, start to, as I said, define the final program and move forward from there with your consensus.
Okay. Well, I think there's a pretty clear consensus that nobody wants lights and nobody wants any major alterations. And again, I know you can't do that on your own. So, and you did come to us in 2019. You've come to us again today. I will rely on you to come back, or whoever to come back if there is a plan to do anything. And I know we're not going to let the Parks Department off the hook if we think there's any chance that they're going to make any alterations there. But again, as Ann said, it is a forever wild area. So that, the idea that there would be any significant alteration to that area seems highly unlikely. But just the same, we'll keep our eyes and ears open.
And Bob, if I may add to that, just
yes, Oded, go ahead.
That Grand Rick Hudson Valley, we will also, based on this feasibility study, we will also be hopefully in the future seeking for funding for the next phases. And on our point of view of Grand Rick Hudson Valleys, we are not interested and we're not looking for adding any pavement in Van Cortlandt Park. Also not lighting. I don't want to, sign any contracts here or anything like this, because we are looking to, make the entrance point nicer. I don't think that lighting is even relevant because of the designation there. But to your concerns, our point of view is that we want to improve access to the forever wild forest. That's what we're hoping to do. And for that to happen, it has to remain as forever wild as possible. So we're not interested in any pavement or lights.
Okay, thank you, Oded. Debbie Dolan, I see you're raising your hand in the old-fashioned way.
I was looking for options, with the little hand icon at the bottom of the screen, didn't see it.
That's okay.
So that's why I physically put my hand up. My husband, Matt, and I are, part of the Van Cortlandt Alliance Vital Volunteers program. And we currently work on the Cass Gallagher Trail in the Northwest Forest. Matt and I were also present at one of the initial Groundworks meetings with Oded there presiding. It's critical, in our opinion, we're in the North Woods practically every day, Northwest Woods, that those entrances remain as wide as they are currently. That fence is not taken down, and even with the no cycling sign there now, I have shown Stephanie photos that I've taken of cyclists who get a bicycle through even that entrance, okay, which is meant for pedestrians. And I even have pointed out to them, it says no bicycling, like, what is it to you? And they continue on their way. Okay, so that's even with that entrance at that width, okay? But to open that, we have the most litter. Matt and I, as part of our responsibilities, we pick up litter. Most of the litter that we see is at those entrances, at those entry points. There's a lot of dumping that occurs at this juncture, okay? So to widen that would create more of that problem. Also, at those entrances, there's also more partying that goes on, more noise that goes on at those entrance areas. I just want to bring that out. And also, there's the matter of desire trails. People who maintain the trails, we notice that the more people you have in certain areas, they create desire trails, trampling through the woods, making their own trails. So, the more people that you have pouring into the park, the more issues you have maintaining a forever wild area.
Okay, Debbie, thank you. Does anybody from Groundworks want to comment?
I can
well,
just
again, you know, I think this is very good input because it's from you guys that spend a lot of time in the park. So again, as Oded and I think we've been saying this evening, this is all good data that we're going to collect, put this in the feasibility study, and this will be used by ongoing groups to formulate a final program and then proceed if there is a design and the construction drawings and that stuff and bidding, you know, that's to be determined because you're also talking about having to fund this project. So that could take some time.
Okay. One last question. I see Deb Travis, you have your hand up. Let me just say, as I said, this is the last question. You can always send questions to the community board office about this issue or any other issue, but we do have other items on the agenda tonight and we have to move on. So that's why I'm taking this question from Deb and then we will move on. Deb?
Yep, I'll go really fast. I think just to say, I think the big concern that the public has is that this is this is a very specialized forest. It's forever wild forest, and that I think that if you ask the general public what songs should the Metropolitan Opera sing, they would say they should sing popular songs, and that it's not necessarily appropriate to ask everybody how they would like the Northwest Forest to be used. I think that's the concern, is that you know, people will want to encourage all sorts of other uses instead of really identifying the way that it is used now and making that better. And that's the thing I wanted to just highlight, is I think I didn't want it to get lost. I believe her name was Catherine when she was talking about birding, that this seems like an opportunity to also find ways to enhance existing use for this park, or this part of the park. And so are there, I saw the removal of the invasives as one of the items, but are there other native species of shrubs and forbs and other plant life that should be added or augmented that are missing, that were damaged or have just been destroyed, that would encourage existing birding habitat? I think that I think we would all feel better knowing that there were foresters and naturalists being consulted more than just everybody at large, and that, you know, that their opinions were being prioritized. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oded and Mark?
Yeah, I just want to comment on what Deborah said, is that what you mentioned about, you know, the desire of the people versus other values, it points out exactly to the importance of the Forever Wild program. That's exactly the goal of the Forever Wild program, and that is, and you know, I think that it's great that we get that, you know, the input that we collect is all within the boundaries that are defined by the Forever Wild program in order to enhance those values you're mentioning.
All right, well, thank you very much, Oded, Mark, and thank you for coming before the Community Board Parks Committee. We will definitely stay in touch with you and follow up with you. I think we had a good discussion tonight, and you heard a lot of different ideas and a lot of different comments from everybody in the community. And I think one thing that comes across loud and clear is that everybody has a great interest in the Northwest Forest. It's very important to this community, and the Forever Wild designation has great value to everybody in this community. And we want to make sure that that is respected in whatever transpires going forward. But thanks once again for coming before us. We're going to move on to the next agenda item. And that agenda item is a discussion of the logistical plan for the cross-country season. Although it's going to be discussed by members of the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance, I do want to make the point that it's not the Alliance by itself that determines what the protocol is going to be for the cross-country season. That's the City Parks Department as a whole that really makes those determinations. But you know, we're talking about Van Cortlandt Park here, and so I believe that somebody, and I'm not sure whether it's Stephanie or Christina or who it is, but
it's me. It'll be Stephanie Ehrlich, unless
okay.
I'm working off a phone, so I'm not able to see if my colleague Stephanie Thayer is here.
I don't see her on the call, Stephanie.
Okay, so I will. I'll talk about it, and just for clarification, I wear two hats, which can sometimes be a little confusing. And just to make things more exciting, there are two Stephanies at Van Cortlandt Park, so that just makes things so much more fun. So I'm Stephanie Ehrlich, and I'm the park administrator, but I'm also the executive director of the Alliance. The cross-country races are permitted and run by the Parks Department, as Bob was saying. But it's hard, you know, since I wear two hats, it's hard for folks to discern which hat I'm wearing at any particular time. That said, we are working closely with the Hill schools, and that would be Manhattan College, Horace Mann, Fieldston, Riverdale Country School, also with Catholic high schools, public schools, their league. And we have been talking with them in advance of the races, which have begun. And we've been working with NYPD and also with Park Enforcement Patrol to really help move the traffic along, because from what I understand in previous years, that was a very big community concern. We have made a concerted effort to make that better, and I'm hoping that it continues to improve. There are some large races. There's a very big race, the Manhattan College Invitational, which is world famous and has a long and storied history. That is on Saturday, October 9th. And if anyone would like to volunteer to help us on that day, we'll send something out through the community board to have you help us out with that. And then there is a Foot Locker race, which is also large, and that is the last race of the season. That is November 27th. And there may be some mid-size races between now and then. One of the things that we have tried to do is in order to kind of lessen the amount of traffic is we have tried to keep the races to 500 or fewer participants. And we've also, we've created some space between morning sessions and afternoon sessions. So allowing for the morning group to run their races, break down, clean up, and go home, and then giving some time for the next set of races to set up. So far, it seems to be working. I haven't heard any complaints about traffic yet, but I'm the person to contact if there is any issue at all. And you can reach me. It's actually, my Alliance address is slightly easier because it's just my first name, Stephanie@vancortlandt.org. I'm sure we can provide my email address somewhere, right, Bob?
I think you just did, Stephanie.
There you go. Okay. But if anybody needs to see it written down. So if anybody has any issues, you can contact me that way. I'm also stephanie.ehrlich@parks.nyc.gov. And I saw that there are a bunch of our cross-country partners who are here on this call. I want to acknowledge, I saw Manhattan College, and I think I saw George Feebles from Catholic high schools. So they're all very, very much trying to listen to the community and be responsive and do a better job with moving buses along and private individual cars.
So Stephanie, I'm sorry, are you finished, Stephanie?
I am.
Okay. I have some experience at this from past years. I just want to find out from you, are you doing with the, I mean, first of all, as I understand it, if you're limiting yourself to 500, then immediately we're in a different universe from what we were in a few years ago. The Manhattan College Invitational used to get thousands of runners.
So I'm sorry, Bob, for lack of clarity. So with the exception of those larger races, So that Manhattan College race is still a few thousand people. And the Foot Locker race is also a few thousand people. So there are still a handful of very large races, but other than that, we have been trying to limit the number of participants.
All right. So with those large races, Stephanie, in the past, what has happened is that everybody was notified that the buses were to drop off the runners and coaches, and then they were to go over to Jerome Avenue on the other side of the park, the east side of the park. Is that still the protocol?
That is still the protocol. And they've all been told in advance. And that's how we're working with the schools and with the leagues. They are sending that information to their bus companies in advance. There was an instance just a week ago where the bus company did not follow the protocol. And George from Catholic High School, he sent them a very stern email, which he forwarded to me to let them know that they need to follow the protocol. So I feel like there's a real effort being made on everyone's part to address this and to adhere to that protocol.
Good. The other issue that we had in the past was parents dropping off kids, one kid or several kids, whatever it might be. And then some of the parents would hang around. They would double park. They would spend some time there. In the past, we have had cooperation from the 50th precinct. It was the only way we could get the private cars to move along. Is that still going to be the case this year, Stephanie?
So for those larger races, so for the Manhattan College Invitational and Foot Locker and some of the bigger races that are legacy races, we have the cooperation of NYPD. And then for some of the kind of mid-size races, another thing that we have implemented this year is asking the schools to help with the bill for park enforcement patrol. So that means that we will have additional park enforcement on site, so that they can take care of some of those.
And the 5-0 is cooperating for the bigger meets?
Absolutely. Captain Gervin from the 5-0 has been extremely responsive, and they will be involved with the larger meets, and for when they are able to, for the mid-sized meets as well.
I'm glad to hear that. All right, so I see we have a couple of questions. I'll start with Rob Jaklowski.
Hi. First of all, I'll volunteer to help on that October 9th race. So I'll send an email. But I have to say that after a very unhappy meeting 3 years ago, where there were all those complaints about the double park buses in the before COVID, I saw an improvement that season with the double park buses. So I feel like, who knows what's going to happen now that the world has been transformed, but it's felt like things were getting better once there was some enforcement and the 50th came in and started moving people along, and the bus drivers didn't park right on Broadway. So I wanted to say that, I think you were already doing a pretty good job before the world changed.
Well, that would be my predecessors, and I'll pass that along to them. Thank you. But I do think that there's sort of a constant vigilance that's necessary.
Okay, thanks, Rob. And I see a question from Mr. Febbles. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Bender. It's George Febles. I'm the Catholic High School administrator for cross country for the Catholic high schools in New York City, and I'm joined by the Catholic High School sports president, Mr. Kevin Piggott. Stephanie Irvin is the girls cross country chair, and you probably know Coach Kerry Gallagher of Manhattan College and Coach Brian Horowitz of Fordham University. And I'd like to thank Stephanie and also the comments from Mr. Jaklowski about our efforts. We've done our best really to work last few years, and I've been doing it many, many years. We love the park. I was a former resident of Riverdale as well. And we certainly never like to hear those complaints. And it is a very difficult job to talk to so many, many different coaches, almost impossible to track down every parent. Those parents are rotating all the time. We do what we can. There will still be infractions. There's no doubt but it is nice to hear that there's a noticed improvement. I just also wanted to note that cross country is an inexpensive sport for our kids in this city. It's an inclusive sport. There's no cuts. No teams don't have cuts. And we're now in the position because of the new, this year's, and I know that they're experimental and we're hoping that the numbers may change, but those maxes on the medium-sized meets are a little tough for leagues like the CHSAA, certainly for the PSAL. I see Mr. Tom Henning is here representing them as well. I'm sorry I didn't introduce him. Those are very tough. We are now in the position of telling schools for the very first time in any administrator's history, you can't come. We are cut by big numbers on dates, grandfather dates for 95 years. Both the PSAL and Catholic high schools have had to give up this year. And then also even the meets we do have are shrunken so much that we have to tell teams you have to not bring their kids. And so we just wanted to say, I didn't want to take up too much time, but I did want to say, please watch our efforts, our improvement. We're hoping that it's a great fall and that traffic and things are much better, but we would like to move down the road to something closer to that ideal where we can tell all our athletes they can come to the park. We've figured out a way to get everyone to come to the park and not wreck the traffic situation as well. So please know our best efforts are forthcoming. So thank you.
Duly noted, George. I do want to say thank you because I know that you all have sacrificed quite a bit to make this better this year. So thank you very much. One thing, it's hard for me to not say this. As a new person working at the Parks Department, one of the things that I learned is that there are very, very few Park Enforcement Patrol officers for parks. And in order to, they're not assigned to a specific park, they're just assigned to the borough. And so what that means is that there aren't officers who we can count on for anything. Because something more important, something bigger, something terrible could pull them away. And the only way for us to ensure that we have Park Enforcement Patrol is to have more funding for park enforcement officers. So you as community, this is something that you should be really, really squawking about. It is a way to make the park a better place, both in terms of, there are noise complaints, there are other kinds of issues in the park in terms of barbecuing in certain areas and traffic, double parking. If we had more pep in our park, it would make a huge difference. So, so that is my plug for more pep.
Thanks to everybody. I would also like to say, as many of the people on this call know, I chaired this committee for a number of years, up until a couple of years ago. And we did have enormous problems with the traffic on Broadway for many years. And it improved in the last several years, thanks to the cooperation of the Parks Department, the 5-0, and particularly the meet directors, the athletic directors. You guys did a great job of getting the word out to all of the schools and all of the coaches about what the traffic regulations were and helping the Parks Department to enforce those regulations. And things are, last year we didn't have a season because of COVID, but in the year before that, things were much improved over what they had been several years earlier. So really everybody pulled together and the conditions along Broadway are so much better because of that. And I want to thank everybody who did cooperate. And I hope you have a wonderful cross-country season this fall. So I see one other hand, Dan Paternak.
Hey, Bob, thanks. I had just a clarification question. Are these meets being reduced because of COVID? Or is this due to a plan by the Parks Department?
Stephanie, are you still there?
Hey, Stephanie, you're just breaking up a little bit. Hey, I'm sorry, you're just breaking up a little bit.
I'm going to walk over to another spot. Sorry.
Oh, that's good.
So it's a little bit of both. And we wanted to reduce numbers because of COVID, because of safety, and also to manage traffic flow.
So when COVID, I guess when the world does get back to normal, what is the plan regarding numbers and with the high schools? Because I guess what I'm hearing is that some students are not able to compete because of this program.
I think that that's something that we're going to have to see at the end of this season. So there isn't a plan quite yet, but what we are planning to do is look at the season at the end of the fall and look back and do some planning for next year, having had this experience, and hopefully COVID will also shrink back a bit and help us out.
Okay, Dan?
I guess I just didn't, the last, what do you mean COVID shrink back and help you out?
So in terms of safety and security for people as COVID is hopefully going away, that will help with our planning as well.
So meaning, Stephanie, that it would be possible for you to accommodate larger meets in the future. Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't rule it out, yes.
Okay. All right. Mr. Febles, is your hand up from before, or do you have a...
It wasn't, but if I could just add, I do appreciate Mr. Padanek and Ms. Ehrlich and everyone, all your concern and good words on all this. But yeah, it is tough for us, you know, as you alluded, we are paying at least a chunk. I'm not sure if it's all of it, a bit chunk for the park enforcement police. That adds to our budget. So again, we're turning to coaches and saying, not only are you're allowed to come to fewer meets at Van Cortlandt Park, which is the home of cross country, but you're going to pay more overall. And so that's a tough spot to be in. And so we're just asking for what sounds like, you know, some consideration for increasing those numbers. We do not want to get back to the numbers of 8 to 10 years ago and beyond, but something that'll make it so that it's a real cross country season. Just the last analogy would be, imagine a typical high school basketball season, maybe it's 25 games, I guess, being cut back to, 10 or 12 games. It's barely a season, you know what I mean? And that's what, it doesn't look like that to you because it's cross country every day, but because of the smaller meets, big chunks of kids are not, being told to stay home. Coach, just bring a few kids. So again, I don't want to take up too much time. Thank you for everything. I appreciate it.
Sure. So, I mean, it sounds like, as with almost everything else, COVID has changed things. And we're all hoping that if we can get out of this epidemic, we can go back to something closer to what we had before. I think that's what we're all looking forward to in every aspect of life. But thanks very much for those comments. One last question, Jody Colon.
Just actually a comment about the cross country being a no-cut team sport. I was on St. John's track team and didn't get cut from cross country, which is what brought me to Van Cortlandt and was the reason why I moved into this community. So I used to do trail maintenance and things like that. So it would be really great, Stephanie, if you could work out a way to bring back the full number of athletes so that they can compete in cross country. High school sports has such an impact on people, and that has carried through with me even in my 60s. So I understand, Mr. Febles, how important it is to have every athlete participate, because I was one of the people who got to do that. So I don't know if that's good or bad that I'm in the neighborhood now, Bob, but it was because of cross country.
Well, I will tell you, Jody, and Stephanie knows this, I still run the cross country course in Van Cortlandt Park, and I'm not about to tell you how old I am or what my time is, which can be measured in days, I think. Anyway, thanks to all of you. That was a good discussion, and yeah, I'm sure we all hope that we can get back to where we were before, not in terms of traffic problems, but in terms of opening up the season. So thanks to all the coaches for being here tonight. Appreciate it. All right, I'd like to move on to the final agenda item, a discussion that seems particularly apropos tonight of the concept of Forever Wild in our parks. And I believe we have, yes, there she is, Christy King from the Parks Department, who is going to speak to us about the Forever Wild designation and you know, give us a little more insight, a little more education onto what it means. So Christy, I don't know what your actual title is, so please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Bob. Hi, Christy King. I'm the Director of Natural Areas Management at Parks. That's in the I'm in the Forestry, Horticulture, and Natural Resources Division, which I'll touch on very briefly. I have like a few slides. It's going to take maybe 10 to 15 minutes. I'll try to share my screen now, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Great. Let's see.
While you're doing that, could somebody on the committee just take one more screenshot? So,
oh, do you want me to stop?
You have a good cat. No, go right ahead.
Okay.
Just want to get the participants to make sure we've got an accurate count.
All right, from the beginning. How's that? Can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Well, I was thinking as I've been listening to the rest of the earlier parts of the meeting, this feels both relevant, but also like preempted a little bit. There were lots of discussions of Forever Wild, lots of explanations. So I think a lot of what I say here will echo what's already been said. I'll just take it away. Let's see. All right. I think it's surprising to some people to realize that nearly half of New York City is green, and of that 41% of green space within city limits, 12% is natural cover. And then of that 12%, this is across land ownership, so not just at the Parks Department. You can see we have a lot of forest, wetlands, and grasslands there. Sometimes surprising to people, but from what I understand, probably not that surprising to you guys in CB8. Like I mentioned, I'm part of the Forestry, Horticulture, and Natural Resources Division. We think of ourselves as managing nature at New York City Parks. So all of these assets that you see here are very important to us. There's a couple hundred of us in the division, give or take, and we spend our days and weekends taking care of all of these really special places, both in our properties and in the public realm. So New York City's natural areas are spread out across the 5 boroughs. They're usually in the outer fringes of the outer boroughs. Staten Island has the most, Bronx is second. And here, as you guys know, Bronx CB8, you have 3 key natural areas in your district: Riverdale Park, Raoul Wallenberg Forest, and Van Cortlandt Park. Natural areas provide lots of benefits to city residents. I feel like you guys already understand this very well, but we are very proud of this. And this is why our natural areas are so critical to quality of life in New York City. They help the city meet our kind of overarching goals of sustainability, resilience, and equity. And they really just provide so much for New Yorkers in terms of recreation, improving quality of life, and lots of like attenuation benefits like air quality improvement, storm surge mitigation, stormwater management, things like that. And then habitat for wildlife, which was mentioned earlier as a key component of the Forever Wild concept. While they're so valuable, our natural areas are also threatened. This is why we have lots of work to do. They're threatened by development, fragmentation, dumping, invasive plants and pests, pollution, and sea level rise as well for our wetlands especially. So our natural areas need protection because of these things. So the purpose of the Forever Wild program is to protect the designated natural areas that are under our jurisdiction and manage them appropriately over time so that they continue to provide all of these values for future generations of New Yorkers. Forever Wild program, here's a little bit about its history. It was really established in 2001, but even before that, there were local laws establishing wildlife refuges within the city. And then the Natural Resources Group, of which I'm proud to be a part, was established in 1984. It's thought to be the country's oldest municipal conservation organization. And in those early days, we did a lot of surveying, really exploring what were kind of thought of as undeveloped parks, and found so many special things. And that was really the beginning of the push to establish a program to protect these places. So in 2001, we first established the Forever Wild Guidelines, which I'm going to talk about, and identified 51 preserves across all 5 boroughs. And then we've published a map set, and there's management guidelines that are really internal. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And in 2018, we updated the program to add more parkland to the Forever Wild program, and reissued the guidelines and kind of updated them for, you know, it had been like almost 20 years. So we took another stab at that. So Forever Wild fills a regulatory gap. We think of it in that way. It's not a law, but it's a strongly held policy. And it is really our main opportunity to exercise citywide conservation planning at the citywide level. But it complements a lot of other like regulations that each have a more narrow focus. So there's wetland protection laws from both the state and the federal government. All trees on New York City property are protected through a local law. And then there are state and federal laws that protect wildlife, like the Endangered Species Act, and et cetera. So Forever Wild can fill a gap to protect land, to provide guidelines for best management of land beyond what these regulations like require. So what makes a park Forever Wild? How are some things Forever Wild and some things not? We, especially when we revisited this in 2018, we got to like, we were like, okay, like, why would we add more? What are we doing here? So the most important thing, kind of, maybe this is obvious, is natural cover. You can see here, it's like vegetated, but it's not lawn and usually wet, like a salt marsh or a forest. We've detected these things using aerial imagery, and we can kind of pull out where they are and then explore them on the ground. So natural cover, pretty obvious, right? Greater than 2 acres in size. This is kind of like a habitat connectivity or like habitat patch size rule of thumb that we adopted. So there actually are some small parks you can see here. This is a screenshot of Staten Island. There are a couple of small parks that are considered Forever Wild, even though Arbutus Woods is only 2.6 acres and Kingdom Pond Park only 4, but they play an important role in like the patchwork of natural cover across the city, even small parks do. Forever Wild parks often include restoration areas. This is where we at the Natural Resources Group focus our efforts. We improve and restore and manage natural habitats, and we've done hundreds of acres over the years. I think over 1,000 actually, if you add up the wetlands and forests that we've restored. And often in our Forever Wild areas, you'll find rare species, both plants and wildlife. That's what makes these places so special, is they provide refuge for really special animals and plants from the difficulties of our urban landscape. So I mentioned these management guidelines. I'm just going to really briefly go over like some high level do's and don'ts, but we think of the Forever Wild program as like an internal policy to guide ourselves how best to take care of these special places. But what I'm going to go over is certainly relevant to like anyone. And we have specific guidelines for each division of the Parks Department that we've shared with them and really worked with each division to develop like in concert with how they do things. So everyone can kind of agree on what we're writing down so there's less conflict later. So general protection dues. We always, as parkies, like to remind users of all the park rules within Forever Wild areas. Kind of interesting to note, their Forever Wild areas do not have unique rules, but a subset of park rules are especially important in them. Some people mentioned biking. Biking, I believe, is actually not allowed on any New York City park path except for the designated greenways and mountain bike trails. So we take care to enforce that, and like, you know, no motorized vehicles within Forever Wild areas. So it's just, they're not unique, but they are especially relevant. We pay special attention to disturbances, vandalism, and dumping. We protect these spaces through fencing. We try to use timber rail whenever possible because it's more attractive to the eye. We at Natural Resources Group serve as internal advisors for the rest of the agency. When someone's not sure if they're working within a stream or a wetland area, we can assist and advise with permitting and regulatory requirements. And then same for special events like, you know, for example, I feel like we've talked before with someone out in Queens about like filming like a big fight scene in like the woods, and they were talking like hundreds of extras, and we were just like, oh, that sounds like a lot of vegetation trampling, for example. So we pay special attention to the type of permitted activities that happen in our Forever Wild areas. In terms of don'ts, there's pretty basic stuff like not driving vehicles off paths. You know, parks maintenance vehicles drive through the parks all the time, but we really want ourselves and everybody to stay on trail as best as possible, avoiding use of heavy equipment unless it's in like a park improvement or restoration project, siting of salt storage to minimize runoff into natural areas, as salt can really degrade soils and is damaging to plants. We've worked in concert with the wildlife unit on not using rodenticides in areas that are known to be like habitat for birds of prey to reduce their susceptibility to rodenticides. And then in terms of vegetation removal and planting, we always advise to not remove any native plants in natural areas. It's like the native plants growing there, that's really special and great. And we want to leave those in place, especially if they're volunteering on their own. And then even for poison ivy, you know, poison ivy is a native plant, but we do, of course, it's removed along trail corridors where it can brush up against someone's legs while hiking. We don't want anyone to get poison ivy. It can be rough, but like within the park, away from the trail, it's actually an important part of our native flora. And then with woody debris, we like woody debris in the forest. It's a very important natural part of the habitat, but we also discourage dumping of excessive woody debris, like no leaf litter, or horticultural waste, or like we try to avoid large mulching things unless we're like maybe mulching a path lightly or mulching planted trees and shrubs. I think that's actually my last slide. So I can stop sharing here and I'm happy to answer any questions. I have a few other like background slides in my pocket if needed, but I think that basically covers it. I'll stop now. Thanks.
Christy, thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question, and I don't know whether you're the right person for this or perhaps somebody else on the Zoom. In Van Cortlandt Park, not all of the park is Forever Wild. We were just discussing the Northwest Woods, for example, which is Forever Wild, and also the Northeast Woods, which are also called the Croton Woods, I'm pretty sure that's also Forever Wild over there. But I'm just wondering, I've never actually seen a map of Van Cortlandt Park that identifies the boundaries of the Forever Wild area. And I'm just wondering, is there such a map? Do you know?
Yeah, there is. We have not, many parts of the parks website are somewhat out of date, and we've been working to get those updated. But in the meantime, the most up-to-date Forever Wild boundaries are on New York City Open Data. If anyone's familiar with that portal, if you just Google that, New York City Open Data, and you can search for Forever Wild, or you can search for natural areas. Many city data sets are publicly available, and this is one of them. And you can both download it as a layer, but also they have a viewer, like just a map viewer, where you can look at the data and kind of pan around the city and see exactly what you're looking for.
Oh, that's very good to know. Thank you. Now I have one other question, and again, I'm not sure this is for you. One of the reasons this item is on the agenda tonight is that we have a lot of fortunately a lot of volunteers in our parks who work with the Parks Department, work with Partnership for Parks and other groups to do cleanups and planting and so on. It's been brought to our attention on the community board that we also have some freelance volunteers who are not authorized, not working with the Parks Department. And in some of the parks have actually been removing native plants. This is, I'm not sure this has happened in any of the Forever Wild areas, but it has happened in some of our local parks. Say a little bit about this. I mean, no one is supposed to be removing anything from any of the parks, as I understand, in terms of vegetation or natural areas without authorization. Whether it's a Forever Wild area or just a neighborhood park that doesn't have that designation. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. There's a New York City Parks rule against collecting anything in the parks. And, of course, there are exceptions, like if you're part of a permitted volunteer group or working with the Parks Department, or if you apply for a research permit to kind of collect things from the park, that's allowed as well. We usually approve those if they're reasonable. But yeah, that sounds concerning. I mean, my first kind of hunch is I wonder if they know what they're doing, or, sometimes some native plant communities can look weedy or unkempt, I would say. And I don't know. I just think a little education can go a long way in a situation like that, assuming that these folks have good intentions as stewards, which I imagine they do. Like in my heart, I want to think that they want to help the parks,
Yeah, no, I don't know anything about motivations, and, it's entirely possible somebody does this who thinks they're actually doing some good, but, but I just wanted to clarify that nobody can go freelancing in the parks and decide to do their own cleanup without authorization.
Yes, that's true. And a super steward permit would be the way to go for anyone who wants to work independently. We do train and permit individual independent volunteers to do their own work, which kind of fun. It can feel rogue, but really you know what you're doing and you have a special card that says you're allowed to do it. So that's a really great program. And if anyone's interested, I can share information, or you can look it up on the parks website under stewardship.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. So you go to the parks website and you search stewardship?
Yeah.
Okay, that seems clear enough. Jody, I see you have a question.
Surprise. Christy, thank you so much for that presentation. I especially appreciate that you addressed poison ivy and woody debris, which are really important to the wildlife and the habitat. Could you just talk, you said a really great word just now about looking unkempt. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the aesthetic of Forever Wild versus a landscaped and manicured park like Henry Hudson? I think that's part of the motivation of some of the freelance people is they think that the park looks unkempt, and they think they're helping by making the trails wider and removing all these plants that are draping over. And they're even woodland gardening. I've seen hostas and galanthus in Riverdale Park. So people are actually trying to create ornamental gardens in some of these areas. I've had people ask why we can't plant daffodil bulbs. So could you just really extrapolate a little bit more and expound on the aesthetic look of a Forever Wild natural area versus a landscape manicured, more formal planting area?
Yeah, sure, I can try. I mean, I don't know if I can like convince someone who's a fan of the English garden to get into the like native wildflower meadow. It's like, you know, to each their own, I guess. But yeah, it is really important that our Forever Wild areas remain as such. And I think that over time and with increased familiarity, residents can learn to appreciate and really see the beauty and the change in the natural landscape, like throughout the seasons. And, you know, I guess to say, just to like give a little, there is room to, I imagine that there is room to clean up some of the more rural areas that may kind of turn people off. And why I say that is because I bet there are some invasive species mixed in with some of what they're looking at. And I don't know, I'd like to think that maybe that's why it might not look as nice as some of our invasive species can really, they're a little bit like outsized for their space. And they can contribute again to a sense of being out of balance. But definitely like a young forest can look very busy. It can be very dense, like lots of trees and shrubs. And I mean, we are working to manage spaces like that. And yeah, I mean, talking about this, I'm just like, I got to see these areas that are in question. I'm like so curious what the situation is.
I'll be happy to give you a tour.
Great. Maybe we can connect offline. I'm really curious because, you know, I get it, but it is really, I think, important for both ecological reasons and like, I don't know, dare I say like psychological reasons to have some wild spaces in our parks that really kind of teach New Yorkers to understand what nature can look like. And then I think that just really broadens our experience of living in an urban area.
Great, thank you. Bob, one more question, please.
Go ahead, Jody.
Shorefront Park, which is in between the oval loop that leads down to the Metro North Railroad Station. It's under the Henry Hudson Bridge. It has little pockets that are disrupted by construction on the bridge, but it is more than 2 acres. Is there a process where we can get some of it designated as Forever Wild? Because even though it is disrupted by the infrastructure and the construction, it is habitat. There are a lot of birds in there. There's possums, raccoons, hawks, etc. Is there a process for us to have NRG come and look at that park again and possibly designate pieces of it as Forever Wild? That has been the subject of a lot of this manicuring that has been happening.
Is this the park Spuyten Duyvil that you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's what I call it in my head. But I have seen it called Spuyten Duyvil Waterfront Park. You know, God, is that Forever Wild? I guess it's not. I have been there though before, and it's been years. But I would love to take a look at it again, or at least reference my notes for when we updated the guidelines in 2018 or updated the maps in 2018, like why we didn't include it. I think I could jog my memory about that, and I'm happy to connect with you offline if you want to know the details.
That's really great. My email's public. It's jody.compost@gmail.com.
Love it.
Or you could do spuytenduyvilny@gmail.com if you can spell it. And I do have an NRG list from the 90s when we did a plant inventory there. So
cool. That's cool.
So yes, I would love to, this is really an important topic as more people are getting out into the parks and starting to look for a very Disney version of woods. Yes, that's the nicest thing I could say. So I so appreciate that you came and you did talk about this. And thank you, Bob, for having Christy come here.
Well, thanks to Christy for coming. I have one last question. I don't see any other hands up. I'm in Van Cortlandt Park, and particularly in the Northwest Woods, about 5 times a week. At least I have been since COVID. And it seems to me, and again, this is my own personal observation, it seems to me that the deer population in Van Cortlandt is higher this past year than it has been in years past.
Oh no.
And I don't know, and again, this question may actually be a question for Stephanie Ehrlich or somebody else. I'm just wondering if anybody actually tracks the deer population in the park, and whether anybody knows for a fact that there is an increase in the deer population.
I think our wildlife unit may know. They have been doing a deer population study in the Bronx. It's their work in the Bronx is definitely not at the level that they're funded to do in Staten Island. We do a lot of work in Pelham Bay Park directly. We partner with Stephanie and her team to do work in Van Cortlandt, but they're more of the daily on the ground presence. Anyway, there are deer everywhere in Pelham Bay Park, but in my mind, much fewer in Van Cortlandt. So I'm saddened to hear what you're saying. And I do imagine there may be data out there on whether or not the population has grown, but that would be our wildlife unit. And I can look into that for you for sure.
Well, we have each other's emails. Let's just follow up, because I'd be curious to know whether anybody is actually, keeping data on that subject,
mm-hmm.
And whether there really has been a change.
Me too. I hope not.
Okay. Stephanie Coggins, I see.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I have a Facebook group that I started this year called Riverdale, Spiden, Diable, Kingsbridge Views, that is centered around issues of aesthetics, culture, nature, history, etc. In our community. And to advertise this presentation, I, created a little small presentation of my own with links to the park's Forever Wild page. So I would like to ask if there are any materials that I can get that I can post on Facebook to educate people further about the issue of Forever Wild. And 2, I'd like to ask what Parks does to educate people themselves about the existence of Forever Wild, because, right here, I live in Spiden Diable, and I live a hop, skip, and a jump from Riverdale Park and Raoul Wallenberg, and literally less than a hop to Shorefront Park. And the people that live right here in Spiden Diable are not aware of the fact that these parks are Forever Wild, and they do not understand that these parks are protected, and they don't understand the reasons why these parks need to be protected. What is Parks doing to increase public education on Forever Wild?
That's a really good question. I don't have a great answer for you right offhand. I think we have a lot of work to do in this realm. And first and foremost could be updating our website to provide more up-to-date information on where our natural areas are and what it means to be considered Forever Wild. I know that we really kind of spread the gospel whenever we have stewardship events, and as we train stewards. So it's like in our kind of day-to-day vernacular, it comes up a lot. And also in our internal discussions about like projects, reviewing projects of other agencies, reviewing our own projects internally, but the extent to which we've made it a public facing tool or idea, I'd say is somewhat limited. So yeah, I think we have a lot to do there, Stephanie, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And I hope that we can move in that direction. And it's certainly on my list. So
I think that it's extremely important in, you know, in the local community. Spiden-Duyvil and Riverdale are on a lot of developers' radars. Now, I understand that these parks are protected as parkland. It's not any land that can be protected, but public sentiment about the issue of keeping these areas pristine as possible needs to be improved. It's actually really amazing to me that people are surrounded by so much nature and they don't know. And actually Jody brought this up about the issue of the Disneyfication of our areas. We have a lot of people who are moving here from, let's say, Manhattan, and they have a certain idea about what parks should be. You know, it's their idea of parks are more like what they see in like places like Central Park, not what we have here. But I understand people's sentiments about like having convenience. Everybody likes convenience, but in this era where we're faced with, you know, the issues of climate change, it's more important than ever. And I would be happy to do, you know, what I can to get the word out through my Facebook. I actually have two Facebook groups, one that's called Voters Forum that deals with it on a political, more of a political platform. And then my second one, which is more on a, you know, it's called Views, and it's more of an aesthetic, public education platform. But, you know, I would be happy to help and do what I can also.
That's so great. I'm like honestly so inspired by all of you and all the kind of energy I've heard about protecting these special places, both with the other specific project discussion. And now one thing I thought of that I wanted to mention is our partner, the Natural Areas Conservancy. They're our nonprofit partner in stewarding and caring for New York City's natural areas. And I encourage you to look them up if you haven't yet. They're a unique conservancy and that they support all 10,000 acres of natural areas, not just like a single park, which is kind of special. And we work really closely with them, and they do, you know, more in terms of advocacy and awareness, and you might feel driven by some of what they are producing. So I wanted to mention that. And then the other thing, since you brought up climate change, is we are really seeing like so much attention from these like recent events and the importance of natural infrastructure. And so, you know, while it's certainly like a shame, like what it takes to kind of get attention on, say, funding wetland restoration, I mean, we'll take what we can get. And I think it's good that people are looking to green infrastructure as well as more traditional infrastructure to protect our city from the kind of inevitable that's ahead of us.
Christy, thanks very much for the presentation and for taking the questions. And yeah, I think Stephanie raised a very good question there about public education and public outreach around the Forever Wild concept. So, you know, whatever we can do, you know, I think we can be partners in that enterprise with you, you know, to make sure that the community is more aware of what that designation means. But again, thanks for coming in and doing the presentation and taking the questions.
Sure, you're very welcome. It was enjoyable.
Thanks. So it's 2.5 hours in, and I think we can call it a night. So thanks to everybody. If there's any truly urgent matter that anybody wants to bring up, please raise your hand. And if not, that would be even better. So going once, going twice.
How about just
Okay.
thank you?
I'm sorry?
This is Catherine again. Thank you. And thank you, Bob, for having the, for Christy here. And thanks for that beautiful presentation on Forever Wild. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. All right.
Bob?
So I'm
Sorry.
sorry.
I'm sorry. I know you're at the end of the meeting. I just wanted to mention that KHCC is doing beautification on its community garden on Saturday, 11 to 2. It's also coinciding with an arts event that we're having. So I would, for all of us park lovers, we'd appreciate if anyone wanted to come out and help us. It's our last volunteer day of the season, and we'll start again in the spring.
So say that again, Margaret. So that's Saturday, this Saturday from
This Saturday from 11 to 2.
11 to 2. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's at the Kingsbridge Heights Community Center.
Yeah, 3101 Kingsbridge Terrace.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Marvin, this is truly important, right?
Well, I just want to say that I was totally quiet throughout the entire meeting, listening to everybody. And I found that it was very interesting and important because after all, we have a little park named after my wife. Of course, no one ever mentions that, the Phyllis Post Goodman Park, because there's no wildlife there, except for doggies that people bring in. But I just want to say that I want to say thank you that we have the Parks Committee, and I've been, as I say, quiet all along anyway.
Thank you for that, Marvin. Yes, you've mentioned it before, and everybody should know it is a small park, Phyllis Post Goodman Park.
I remember it was the community board that instituted the naming of that park because my wife Phyllis had been a member of the community board for more than 25 years when she died.
Yeah, we value all our parks, Marvin, and that one in particular. Thank you. All right, so thank you, everybody. It was a long meeting, but I think we covered some very important subjects tonight. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the Parks Committee will meet on the 4th Wednesday in October. And I'm very happy to report that somebody else will be chairing that meeting. So everyone have a good evening. Great to see you all. Good night.